The Best of Living in Iowa is funded in part by the Gilchrist Foundation. Founded by Jocelyn Gilchrist, furthering the philanthropic interests of the Gilchrist family in wildlife and conservation, the arts and public broadcasting, and disaster relief.
Funding for this program was provided by Friends, the Iowa Public Television Foundation. Generations of families and friends who feel passionate about the programs they watch on Iowa Public Television.
Hello, this is Morgan Halgren. For 16 seasons, Living in Iowa told the tale of what it means to be uniquely Iowan. Tonight, we honor that spirit by bringing you another glimpse into our rich heritage with a few stories from our archives. In this Halloween episode of The Best of Living in Iowa, we take a graveyard history tour, peer deep into crop circles, and explore burial customs from our past.
If you've ever enjoyed Spoon River Anthology or the play Our Town, you know how fascinating it can be to hear personal histories told from the spirit world. Well, some Burlington residents are dead certain that it's also a way to teach local history and instill civic pride.
Neil Pozlowski and Josh Hollander study hard, like most students at Burlington High. However, when it comes to learning history, they have an edge. That's because Neil and Josh have a time machine.
Oh yeah, we do real good in history class at school. It's really a lot of fun.
It's an excellent way. I mean, you're actually reliving it. You know, you're like bringing yourself back into that time. And
Neil and Josh are part of a growing number of time travelers in the Burlington area, known as the Great River Living History Society. While its members don't actually have access to a time machine, they are capable of bringing the past to the present.
Yes, I've been a living historian, as we call ourselves, for about 9 years, and I'm deeply in love with the Civil War era. I have been since I was a child. And for me, this is just the closest you'll ever get to actually getting to go back in time. It's a time trip.
Tara Harl Odom and other members of the Great River Living History Society are reenactors. That is, they bring history to life, first by doing research, then by dressing and acting like people from the past. Recently, Tara breathed some new life into Burlington by digging into its past and forming Candlelight Tours Incorporated, an organization of people who believe a walk through a cemetery after dark is a great way to learn history.
A lot of people at first looked at me and said cemetery tour, and they kind of looked funny, like, you know, what's that? And at first we did have some negative comments about who would want to traipse around a cemetery at night. But then when we got closer to the event last year, people started getting very excited. And then once the event was over, it just sparked a wellspring of enthusiasm in the town.
This year's Candlelight Tour took place at the Sacred Heart Cemetery. There, reenactors from all walks of life resurrected some of Burlington's past residents who had passed on. Some of those former residents included Mrs. Shue, whose husband, an early Burlington foundry owner, died over a wage dispute.
A Mr. Henry Martin, a former employee, came into the foundry requesting pay due for work he had done 2 to 3 weeks prior. Mr. Shue replied he had no funds with him, but if he would call the next morning, at least part of the money would be forthcoming. Mr. Martin grew angry at this reply and stooped to pick up a heavy iron ladle, raised it above his shoulders, and dealt Mr. Shue 3 murderous blows to the top of his head.
Dr. Evelyn Swearingen played the role of Mrs. Shue. In real life, she and her husband are chiropractors in Burlington. Her husband, Dr. Tom Swearingen, played the role of Anton Helm. Anton was a Union soldier who survived the Civil War only to be stabbed by a friend and fellow Union soldier.
John said that he thought the soldiers of the Army of the Tennessee were better soldiers than those of the Army of the Potomac. Now, can you imagine anybody would say such a thing? Well, I couldn't, and I told John. When you start doing the research to make sure that the costumes that you're wearing are correct, you really learn the history. You learn what the people wore, what they ate, how they lived even back during that time, and it's a very good way to learn the history. When we got to the corner of Kernan Agency, I guess John finally lost control of his hot Irish temper, for he reached down into his boot, pulled out a knife, and stabbed me with it. The blade cut a hole in the left ventricle of my heart. And
William McKeever was a Burlington resident who was executed in Missouri.
As they put the noose around his neck, George asked for forgiveness, but the people only assumed that was his admission of guilt. After that, they sprang.
His story is told by his wife, played by Marlene Holstein, who works in a downtown bank.
When they asked me to do this, they give you obituaries from the newspaper from the time this happened, and they gave me several articles because not only were they not sure that he actually committed this crime, but he was very, very poor and there was not enough funds to actually return the body, so there was a big campaign to get him buried at no cost.
The money to transport the body from Fulton, Missouri to Burlington was provided by the sheriff who executed my husband. Maybe he too had doubts. As for me,
not every reenactment was of a past Burlington resident who had met with an untimely or gruesome end. Notable residents, such as Captain Roy Streckfuss, an early Mississippi riverboat captain, were also portrayed.
In the early days, we hauled primarily freight between the ports of St. Paul and New Orleans. In 1917, the decision was made to convert all of our stern wheelers into excursion boats.
Please, Father, may I tell them about the music?
Why, of course, Lily.
In 1918,
the roles of Captain Streckfuss and his daughter Lily were played by photographer Dennis Frazee and his daughter Laura.
My daughter's in 5th grade and studying Iowa history right now, and so this has really been fun because not only do we read in the books, but then we go out and actually see some of the characters and things that help shape Iowa.
On the banks of the Mississippi, with its wealth.
In all, 17 reenactors brought to life 17 Burlington residents of historic interest. On the 2 nights the event was held, over 800 people took the tour and were given the opportunity to become time travelers themselves, getting a spirited glimpse of Burlington's past.
To me, it's Mecca because it's history come alive, which is just the ultimate for me. But it is quite moving.
'Tis the beautiful city of Burlington, heart of the Middle West.
We all know how complicated it can get trying to root out the truth today. Everyone has an opinion. But a situation in Nevada, Iowa has folks divided into 3 distinct camps. Listen to what they're saying and see where you come down in this circular argument. By the time the spring planting season rolls around, Iowa's fertile fields have been turned into clean slates, waiting for farmers and nature to lay down the year's new designs. But for Brett Anderson, remnants of the past still linger, and try as he might, he just can't seem to plow them under. On a brisk October day in 1996, while combining his fields, Brett came upon 3 mysterious formations: a 30-foot circle with a 2-foot wide outer ring in his beans, and 2 teardrop-shaped formations in corn and grass.
People, when I first discovered the circles, said a bunch of college kids did it or high school kids did it. But once they saw it, you know, they couldn't figure out how anyone could do it that perfect.
The cause is a mystery, but there are plenty of theories. Ranging from pranksters to plasma vortices, Brett's heard them all. Today, his circles have gained attention as part of the worldwide phenomenon known as crop formations.
I've had a lot of calls from all over the United States about it. Several here just in the state of Iowa, and even other farmers here in town have told me they've had them and were afraid to say anything about it because people think they were nuts or off the rocker, you know.
Crazy or not, other Iowa farmers have also come forward. This 55-foot circle was reported in Arlington, Iowa. And these 2 were spotted near Bedford. You might say they're cropping up all over, and you'd be right. In fact, they are occurring worldwide with astounding complexity. For many, the simple explanation is that it's an elaborate hoax. But there are other schools of thought. For example, some think the formations are an attempt by aliens to communicate with us.
This is a trace. It's a physical trace of some kind. Now, what it's a trace of, we're not quite sure.
And a scientific camp claims they are the result of natural forces.
There isn't any group of scientists that I know that could have hoaxed the Nevada formations and about 95% of the others.
The bottom line is that it's all a matter of opinions, and just about everyone seems to have one. In 1996, when Brett Anderson was gathering his opinions, the only input he received was from Beverly Trout, State Director for MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network.
We recognize that in investigating the various reports that come to us that we may not get definitive answers, but we are interested in getting the data, at least having that, and continuing to investigate, try to learn more about this phenomenon, whatever it represents.
With objectivity as her guiding principle, Beverly approached Brett's circles cautiously. Leaving open the possibility of a hoax, she took plant and soil samples and searched for witnesses.
There were some reports from persons who live in the area of Nevada that they had seen unusual aerial activity in the general time frame that those crop formations were discovered. However, there is no way that we can link those reports to the crop formations themselves. There's always the question beyond the question.
In a laboratory outside Ann Arbor, Michigan, Dr. W.C. Levengood, an established plant biophysiologist with over 50 published research papers and 9 patents, has thrown his hat into the crop circle ring. After studying data from over 200 crop formations, Dr. Levengood suggests that we should look toward our own planet for answers. He theorizes that a naturally occurring event called an ion plasma vortex is the primary cause of crop formations.
It's so very, very complex, these energies. But we have some ideas as to how they're formed.
According to Levengood's theory, radiation from space and energy from the sun bombard the Earth's ionosphere. These energies can organize into something similar in shape to a smoke ring, which is then pulled through the atmosphere by gravity. As it is pulled down, this vortex is compressed by the Earth's magnetic field. Its energies intensify, it becomes more unstable, and it sprouts smaller offshoots. Finally, upon their impact with the Earth, the energy turns into a heat similar to that of a microwave oven. Dr. Levengood theorizes that this heat softens the nodes of the plants, causing them to collapse under their own weight and create the pattern formations.
From the recent work that we've done, and the 2 Nevada, Iowa crop formations are right in this category. There are some energies going on that if they get more extensive, the farmer's bottom line is going to be severely affected. These seem to be very pervasive, and if they get more and more pervasive, there will be people interested, believe me.
As a scientist, Dr. Levengood is careful not to validate any theory until all of the evidence is in. In addition to finding these bent plant nodes in many formations, he has come across even more peculiarities upon closer inspection.
The normal amount of magnetic iron in soil is 0.4 milligrams per gram of soil. We're seeing up to 50 to 100 times that amount in these crop formations. Has all the earmarks meteoritic material. Like I say, if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, must be a duck.
Levengood's only explanation is that these deposits are from meteors. In samples from a formation in England, this material even coated the plants.
These plants are wheat plants, and the unique thing here is the magnetic material struck the plants in the molten form and stuck right to it. This is very pure iron oxide, undoubtedly from a meteorite shower. I didn't know what this was when I got into the laboratory, so I began to investigate its properties. I didn't even know it was magnetic. I just thought, well, so I'll try it and see. And wow. Especially when I picked up plant parts, I thought, this is incredible. Never seen anything like it.
While Levengood theorizes that these iron deposits were brought to Earth by plasma vortices, MUFON debates that they were left by alien spacecraft. At the same time, the pranksters claim that they put them there. Recently, some of these self-proclaimed performance artists came forth on national television. Here, through time-lapse photography, a team of 3 men was shown creating a formation in under 5 hours. In fact, anyone with internet access can learn how and why to make their own crop circles. This site makes the argument that all crop circle phenomena are created by artist tricksters, whose intent is to make people aware of the persuasive powers of science and the media. All of this would tend to suggest that the Nevada circles are nothing more than a local hoax.
The Nevada samples are not a hoax. They're not vandals. No. If you put all of the anomalies together, Now, these critics, they will tear into all my statistically sound results, but they have no alternative ideas. They have no rebuttal data. They have nothing. And yet, they're given as much time and credit as my 7 years of work, the blood, sweat, and tears here in the laboratory.
Whether you're persuaded by Levengood's logic, alien arrivals, or the testimonial of tricksters, Brett's mystery remains unsolved.
I don't believe anybody made these circles. I think it's something beyond maybe human that did it. The sheriff's department inspected it and we couldn't find any traces of footprints in or out. And the soil was soft enough that it would have left a footprint because we were leaving footprints. Oh, the stem's like a dead tree limb, you know, you can just, if you go to push it over, it'd snap completely off.
Meanwhile, Brett goes about his daily chores, patiently awaiting answers. He faces the same dilemma that we all face.
You know, you can't shut your mind off into one specific area. I mean, you gotta keep an open mind to it, or you're not gonna learn anything from it. Because you gotta take in all sides, and then it's up to each individual what they wanna base their opinion on.
We're often encouraged to take a closer look at the tiny remaining areas of our natural prairie. Those who have taken the time to do so marvel at the variety of life and the complexity of the ecosystem that thrives in the tall grasses. An even closer look at some of these areas reveals the signs of human lives and the part they played in the history of the prairies. For a better understanding of that history, we turn to 2 Iowans who enjoy concerning themselves with grave matters.
The prairie has a lot to do with feeling like you're in another era. To me, it's like going back and remembering those people.
In 1988, Roxana Curry organized volunteers to remove brushy trees and litter in order to restore a remnant of virgin prairie in the Polk City Cemetery. While researching the history of the cemetery, she discovered the fascinating stories of the earliest pioneers who settled here in the mid-1800s, before the land was even for sale.
There are some that don't understand the value of the grass. They don't think that it's attractive. I think it's beautiful. In my mind, it's almost a memorial to those pioneers who were buried there. I'm sure that was a place then where people stood on top of that hill and just looked to the north and saw waving grasses as far as they could see.
Samuel Hayes was one of the first settlers to arrive here in 1846. Both he and his daughter were believed to have died in the diphtheria epidemic of 1855. As the Crabtree family slowly came west, they founded Methodist churches every place they settled.
Elizabeth Burt was the first white settler to die in Madison Township. She died in 1847, and at that time there were 6 families in Boone, and there was not one settler yet in Story County. Her husband is buried there. By the time he died, he had buried 3 wives, 3 brothers, and 6 children there at the cemetery. And that's a real part of pioneer life, too. It was a very hard time.
This stone is engraved, but some of the earliest graves were marked by only plain rocks. Around 1940, an overzealous caretaker, not realizing the significance of the rocks, gathered many of them in a pile. The paupers area is at this edge of the cemetery, with graves unmarked and overgrown with trees. To surround and protect departed loved ones, cedar trees, a symbol of eternal life, were frequently planted on each corner of a family plot.
Her family just camped there for a few days and the little girl died. And the town went together, bought a tombstone for the little girl, took care of her burial, and then her family went on west. I think that's a beautiful story of kind of a pioneer spirit. This is my favorite stone with a shawl draped over the top of it and a rose. The inscription at the bottom says, "I know that my Redeemer lives."
Roxana has developed a guide for a walking tour of the cemetery and gives slide presentations to community groups. Her husband tells her she knows more about the people here than the people in town. But for her, this pioneer cemetery not only makes history come alive, it reveals as well the unique prairie ecosystem in which the pioneers lived.
People often ask me what's the best time to see the prairie. The only good answer to that question is every 3 weeks, because it changes through the summer.
Rarely found in Iowa, one of the most unusual species here is the prickly pear cactus. It blooms in June with bright yellow blossoms. Roxana feels that you must get out and walk through a prairie to really appreciate its beauty. And the same goes for a cemetery. Bill Reisman of Indianola provides that close-up view of the Woodland Cemetery in Des Moines with an interpretation of its symbols.
This stone, popular at the turn of the century, indicates the Christian concept of resurrection. And as we die, the branches are broken. But on these stones, you'll notice usually on the right side, there'll be a vine climbing the side of the tree, indicating that out of death comes new life. Many of the symbols are traditionally from England, but they are based on an understanding of the cultures of Egypt and Greece and the Roman Empire. Originally, they were carved by cabinet makers on the East Coast. Those stones came as ballast in the ships from England. If you notice at the top of this particular monument, you have an Egyptian urn. The bodily parts remain here, but if you notice at the top, there's a flame indicating that the soul or spirit has departed to heaven.
Several of the large, intricately detailed markers are actually hollow and made of metal. These stones have a roof symbolizing a shelter over one's bodily remains.
The Romans would bury their children under the eaves of their houses for eternal protection. Shakespeare indicates that our life is nothing more than a short time of acting on the stage, and we see here the curtain draped over the stone, indicating the curtain has finally come down in the end of life. This stone, shaped like the Washington Monument, it's believed that at the end of life we would actually become one with God. Therefore, at the pinnacle, all 4 points combine into one.
Many of the oldest tombstones had this common shape of biblical tablets symbolizing a name being added to the Book of Life. Variations of that design are still popular today. A lamb was often used to symbolize the innocence of a child. The clasped hands indicated a gesture of bidding farewell to earthly friends and greeting God.
People who wanted to be buried most like Christ, and they felt that to be buried in a sepulcher or to be buried sideways into the ground was most like their Lord, and they wanted to imitate that. Early in our country, cemeteries were parks, and people would go to make great decisions and consult their dead relatives.
The tradition of wearing black to funerals comes from the old belief that at death you went to the land of utter darkness. The only way to be protected from evil spirits was to blend in or be invisible.
Some were buried kneeling, indicating a posture of humility for when Christ returned. Some were even buried upside down because they believed that in the book of Revelation that there would be great earthquakes before Christ came again, and they would be turned right side up to meet the Lord. Witches were buried face down with rocks on their back to make sure that they would go to hell at the final judgment.
Understanding the symbolism of tombstones and native prairie flowers will enhance your next visit to your local cemetery. You might be lucky enough to find both in a graveyard, like the Hess Prairie Cemetery west of Clinton. Its sea of native grasses and flowers embrace the grave markers.
It's nothing like a weed patch at all. It's specific species of plants, and the prairie adds just incredible visual impact to the stories of the people that are buried there. It's just an incredible thing to know Elizabeth Burt's story. When she looked out of her cabin door, this is what she saw. When her children went out to play, these are the flowers that they picked for her to put on her table.
The Best of Living in Iowa is funded in part by the Gilchrist Foundation. Founded by Jocelyn Gilchrist, furthering the philanthropic interests of the Gilchrist family in wildlife and conservation, the arts and public broadcasting, and disaster relief.
Funding for this program was provided by Friends, the Iowa Public Television Foundation. Generations of families and friends who feel passionate about the programs they watch on Iowa Public Television.